Welcome back to What's New with Mead. I'm here with the ultimate Mead Maker of 2024 and a winner of many other awards in 2024, Kyle Ducharme. He's here to chat about his experience and just detail how he got here, how he became the ultimate Mead Maker, but more specifically, give us even more insight into how to be a great Mead Maker. So Kyle, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting it up and talking shop on mead. It's one of my favorite things to talk about, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure you're like me in that your friends know that you're into mead making, and so then it's like for some friends, for me, they enjoy the conversation, and then others are like, well, I know he really wants to talk about this, and so they stay away from it because they know that it'll be a rabbit hole. I don't know if you have that experience, but...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's whenever somebody introduces me to someone else and then that new person like mentions something honey or bee related or fermentation related. The other person's like, oh, this might go down a rabbit hole. I'm like, I'll refrain for a bit, but
right,
it will happen.
I mean, but that's okay, though. It's we're very passionate about it. I think that's the important part. So I always like to do this because I want people to get to know you. People who are listening might already know you, but give us a little bit of your backstory with mead making, what got you into it, and all that.
Yeah, so I started making mead 2019. I have a degree in food science. I live in Vermont, so it's a pretty beer-centric place. And my parents have a hop yard, so I've kind of been in the beer adjacent industry for a while now. Not really working in it until 2020, where I got into a brewery and quality. But basically, mead was something where it was like I had to figure out a hobby, and fortunately, I struck the right time, like right before COVID, with this hobby. I started out making cider, and I looked up on the internet, okay, what else can I make with this equipment that's not beer? And the search led to wine and mead, and I'm like, what the heck is mead? So then I figured out what it was, and then I made a couple batches. They were horrendous. My sanitation practices were pretty rough, and I was using pretty low quality honey, and just I don't know what I was doing back then, honestly, but I just kept with it, and I knew I could make something good. I think my first like good successful batch was a maple bourbon bochet. I think just the combination of like it's maple. I'm from Vermont. I want to like really not mess this up.
Yeah.
And it helped me like pay attention to sanitation a little bit more, and just the bochet process was a lot of fun too. So I think I also paid attention more because of that. And because I already messed up a few batches, I started looking more on the internet for resources and kind of dove down the rabbit hole that way, by mainly looking up stuff online. So like YouTube videos, like I ran into your videos early on, and that was really helpful. I listened to a lot of the mead podcasts out there, like Got Mead and The Mead House, and those kind of things really got me going. There weren't a lot of people making mead around me, so I decided to do the online route to really get there. And then during COVID, when we were, isolated and couldn't talk to a lot of people in person, the online community really boomed, and that was a great time for me to kind of double down my efforts. So that's kind of like my origin story. And then I just started making more and more and more, and then I started competing. And at first, when I started competing, I didn't really understand what balancing was, and I could like cleanly ferment things, but I didn't know like what would like taste good, and I didn't understand balance in the way that judges would like, and just my family had the beverages at that point, so it's like, oh, I can make mead that my family likes, but can I make mead that other people like?
Yeah.
And then after submitting to Mead Stampede, it just that really like opened the doors for me to learn how to balance and just start thinking about my meat a little bit more critically.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating, especially coming from a food science background, that you already have that mindset where you're like, I wouldn't say, because my brain, food science isn't always the same as like cooking. You know, coming from a cooking background, I feel like is obviously your pairings. When you say food science, like what are you really referring to before I make any bold statements of what I think you're talking about?
Well, I mainly come from like the quality assurance kind of world, so
Okay,
like biological stability and different microbes growing in different media.
that makes sense.
But what I mainly started out with was like public health, nutrition, that kind of stuff in my studies, and then I went into more other food science, and then I got into kind of on the job training stuff with working at Ben and Jerry's in ice cream, and then at a brewery
Hmm.
in the quality assurance roles. Now I do allergen food testing, so like third party, and we actually get like shipments from various breweries to make sure their beer is gluten free,
Oh,
stuff
interesting.
like that. So it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
But
That's super
basically,
cool.
I was a kid when I was young. I started cooking early. I started looking at like Alton Brown and Iron Chef America, like things like that, really at a young age, and that was really entertaining for me. So I just
Yeah.
started at that point, and there's a moment that that kind of resonates with me. When I was young, I was preparing for a Super Bowl party, and I was making like 10 different sauces for all these wings.
Hmm.
And then my dad started calling me Sauce Boss because I had 10 sauces going. I kept tasting them and like adjusting. And my dad's like, "Oh, so yeah, your mead making started back then. Like
Yeah.
that's what you were doing back then, is developing your palate and learning
That's
how to
awesome.
adjust things and make it taste good."
Have you kept that name since then? Have you called yourself the Sauce Boss ever since then?
No, just my dad
Oh,
calls me that. No one else does, but yeah.
that's funny. Well, million dollar question. Do you have the flavor Bible? Is that in your repertoire?
I don't.
Hmm.
I really should. I should have that. The flavor matrix. I do a lot of Google Foo, so I just like
Hmm.
look up a bunch of different things, and I usually find a lot of interesting pairings and
Yeah.
different flavors through that. But I definitely should have those books like just handy, especially when I have a flavor in mind. I wish I had a piece of paper or something like physical in front of me to reference. That way, I'm not just looking on my phone.
Hmm.
But yeah, I like to look up things online all the time just to see what's out there, see what's been done.
Yeah.
Try not to reinvent the wheel too much, but at the same time, use my palate to kind of guide me. Um, and then I look at a lot of different cocktail recipes, a lot of different um, spice blends and things like that to really dial things in to get inspired.
Yeah. Well, so I mentioned the flavor Bible and I feel like people should know it. If they don't know what I'm talking about, maybe I can grab it without falling over. Ah, whew. So the flavor Bible, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, is just a book that has, you name it, ingredient, and then it goes through and gives, no one can read this, but it gives all the pairings that go well with said fruit, said ingredient. And it's such a great resource. Obviously, the internet is very accessible too. So this is maybe a little outdated in that you can just pick up your phone. You don't have to have the book, but it's a good resource to have for anyone who's interested in that. So let's switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about, you mentioned competitive mead making. And this past year, I ran a competitive mead making circuit for the second year in a row called the Ultimate Mead Maker. It was a gauntlet style challenge that we started off with about 14 mead makers and pared down to a singular winning mead maker after a medley of challenges, and we declared them the Ultimate Mead Maker. And this past year, you won that title after surviving all of my conniving challenges and all the things I tried to throw at you guys to make them difficult. So I would love for anyone who's not seen it, you should go back and watch the video because it's very fun. It's the spoilers. Obviously, you're listening to this and you see Kyle's winning, so sorry, but the video's been out for like 3 months, 2.5 months. So go back, watch the video, and of course, then you'll know Kyle won. But regardless, I would love to know, Kyle, what were your takeaways from this year? Because obviously you've been challenged with it before. What did you take away from this year's challenge?
This year's challenge was a lot of fun. I definitely like the mixture of elements of doing adjustments ourselves to a base mead. The bochet, so like using a technique that was really cool, where we all had the same ingredient but had to then adjust technique and then add our own flavors, all within a timeline. The scramble that was the honey tasting was a lot of fun. I just like had to keep running to grab different items, and it was cool to see that people like didn't actually open it up beforehand, and it was just a really fun like Jack in the Box kind of mystery box thing. So that was cool. Definitely throwing in the traditional at the end of that was really interesting. It was very eye-opening kind of thing where I think as mead makers, we sometimes kind of rest on our laurels a little bit with, oh, I've tasted that before. It's like, no, you can revisit things, and especially if you haven't gone back to that honey for a while. So
Yeah.
I think just keeping a sense memory of stuff is really important, and then just keep revisiting different honeys, and maybe have some tea time with various honeys every now and then. It doesn't need to be in the alcoholic sector, but just to keep your vocabulary up, let's just say. And then the last one was really cool because we had to combine that bochet that we made and then a new mead to then do a 50-50 blend. And that was a lot of fun because I got to play around with, like what flavor profile is going to be at the end of this, not just this is the mead I'm making, this is the mead they're drinking. It's like this never happens at competition where they blend mead, so it's so cool to have that experience. Because it's like what we do a lot at home a lot of times is, if this doesn't taste quite right, I might consider blending. And so it's a good way to test our knowledge and test our skills with that, and just play a little more, which I definitely appreciate, because most of the time it's just, I've just packaged up this mead and I send it along, and then I forget about it, and then score sheets come out and medals come, and there's a little bit of detachment from that. But this was just rapid fire and constantly on a timeline, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, I really enjoyed this year. I enjoyed first year, of course, but I really wanted to throw curveballs, and I was trying to figure out how to do the similar elements from previous years. You know, the honey challenge is like something I think everybody should do, and it's very doable. If you're listening to this and you're like, I can't get 20 different kinds of honey. Yes, you can. There's a website called Flying Bee Ranch, and they do these little sampler packs of, I think it's like an ounce of honey, but you can get, I think, up to 12 or 16 different varietals of honey, and go get yourself some. It's like probably 30 or 40 bucks to get it sent to you, but it is amazing research for yourself to understand all the different flavor profiles. So I highly encourage people to do that. Overall, I love this year, and we're not doing it this year only because of time and money. Right now, it's just a little crazy for me in the time world. So I look forward to do it again in the future, but I loved getting to run it, and you're the winner. You're the guy who took home the crown, took home the trophy, and took home $250 too. So if anyone's listening, they're high stakes. Hopefully that paid back, some of the money you've paid for shipping and various things. And I know for a fact you used the money, and you're using the money for another competition. Would you like to talk about your upcoming competition you're running?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm running this competition that's inspired by my experiences when I was young with watching Iron Chef America, where the chefs would be given one ingredient. They would have to highlight that ingredient through a various array of dishes. And I decided to pick this up after the Mead House they started this a while ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually won Best of Show with one of mine
Mm.
one
Oh,
year.
cool.
And basically, it's Iron Chef, but with mead. So it's called the Iron Bee. And this year, the ingredient is hojicha, which
Mm-hmm.
is a roasted green tea. That was chosen by last year's winner. So if you win this year, the Best of Show from this year, you get both honey prizes. I send mead out, and also there's the chance to choose the next year's ingredient. And this is a way for me to judge mead in a way that I don't have the amount of judges in my area to host a major mead competition. So this is a way
Mm-hmm.
for me to introduce a competition to my area. I'm actually going to be incorporating some of the judges in my area this year with they're like in my I have a mead session course
Mm-hmm.
that I do with my club, and basically the goal is to get a lot of these people really familiar with mead so that they're not just good beer judges but also decent mead judges too,
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't go the BJCP route.
Yeah.
But essentially, they're going to help me judge it. And this year, there's two categories for the competition. There's hojicha is throughout, so you have to use hojicha. You
Mm-hmm.
can use other ingredients as well, but I need to know that hojicha is the star ingredient.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there is a session strength, so under 8%, and then a standard plus strength, so
Mm-hmm.
anything over 8%. So basically, a very refreshing and light mead won't be going up against something that's super bold and rich.
Yeah.
That's kind of the goal. So
Yeah.
um, it's going to be a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun last year with black cardamom. I had to clear my palate a lot because I was the only one judging,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that ingredient is really strong.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, you picked another strong. Whoever picked a strong one as well, because I'm entering this year, and so I can say I've been tasting mine, and it is a strong ingredient. The smoked tea aspect is there as well, so y'all might be clearing your palates and chomping down on oyster crackers quite a bit.
Oh
Still,
yeah, yeah. I made for mead day. I made a batch of hojicha mead. It's
hmm
just like a dry session strength sparkling hojicha mead, and I just wanted to highlight the ingredient and see like what does it bring to a mead.
yeah,
So that's something I'm going to do with my judges. I'm going to give them the actual tea a week beforehand and give them some of the mead I made, so that way they have a reference point more so
hmm
than just getting thrown in there. Because at some of these competitions, people just don't know what they don't know,
right.
and it's like if I throw a weird ingredient at them, sometimes they just don't get it. They don't understand that that's like what it's supposed to be.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's very valuable too because it gives a good baseline for what to expect. So I have a funny story with the Mead House podcast. I listened to them, and one time they brought me on, which was really fun. And I also went to the Iron Bee when it was in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and I went like this has been 5, 6 years. I was such a fresh green mead maker. That year they had done. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. Maple, it gives a maple flavor.
Fenugreek.
Yeah, they did fenugreek. And I made the dumbest meat. It still sits up to this day. If anyone's curious, it's this one carboy that sits up at the top. It's been aging now for 6 years. It's pear, cilantro, and fenugreek. And I had this just dumb idea to try it. And so I did it. And I was like my first competition ever entry. So I sent it off. I bought a plane ticket. I went out there because I heard the event was fun, and I was the only person from out of state to roll up there. And my dumb self, like I only brought 2 meads or something, and one was the peppermint mead. And so I'm walking into this place and I'm just like pouring peppermint mead for people. And it's so funny to look back at that and be like, what was I doing? The great people, great event. It was just really funny to look back on that and be like, what was I doing? The only thing people know about me is peppermint mead. And that's such a weird thing to know about somebody. Like, I don't know. It was a very odd time.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Especially that being like welcome to the mead world, because the Minnesota crowd, like that's kind of mead mecca, where so many mead makers of the year are, and
Yeah.
they just have like tutelage over there, and it's wild.
And they were all really nice to me. I mean,
Yeah,
I was the young dude coming in, and nobody said, "Hey, man, you suck. Get out of here." So I was very thankful for that, because I'm sure they could have said that. They're, again, very talented people, like you said. But most importantly for this year, I want to get back to this. You are the Ultimate Mead Maker 2024, and you've also been chasing after another large scale mead making title, and that wrapped up in January or February, one of these, not too long ago,
yeah,
for 2024. But there is the American Mead Maker Association's Mead Maker of the Year, a title that has been around for a couple of years now. It is earned by winning medals, winning placement at a variety of mead competitions. There were like 5 or 6 on the circuit last year, and there are, I think, 4 or 5 on the circuit for this year. And you were chasing all the way up to the top. We got to the very end, and I'm gonna spoil it for anybody who doesn't know, but Kyle almost got first place. I mean, he was right there. He just unfortunately got beat out by a very talented Minneapolis, Minnesota mead maker, Steve Fletty, who's won it like probably 4 or 5 times in a row. That dude's unstoppable. Like,
yeah. He's done some serious work at National Homebrew Competition, and he's a pillar of the community, and he's featured on a lot of like Chop and Brew episodes, and he's a great guy. I met him, and yeah, I can't speak highly enough of his mead, and just him being in the mead community. So yeah. But the overall competition was a lot of fun. I do have like some regrets about not sending anything to the first competition of the year. It's just that's something that you got to pay attention to if you're going to go after these heavy hitting mead makers, but also just you got to give yourself a chance. So you have to enter as many meads as possible to all the competitions that are in the circuit, and it's a lot to keep track of. You've had to made a lot of different meads in a lot of different categories, and it's a lot. It's just a lot in general. I will not say that it's something that everyone should do every year, or even if you're a great mead maker, you don't necessarily have to do it. Just know it is an option for you if you want to try to play the game. But yeah, I'm definitely proud of what I did this year. The last competition of the year was definitely a nail biter. I won Best of Show at that competition with a couple other first place, which was fun. Just being like, oh, I got this many points, and Steve got that many points, and it came down to one first place would have tied us if I got one more. Man. So definitely close, but I'm glad it was close, and glad it went down that way.
I remember that happened to I think Bill 2 years ago. Bill Boyer had a similar situation. It's really intense, and like you're saying, it is hardcore when you really want to get on the sphere of competing. And I'm saying that as someone who's doing that now. I love getting to enter mead comps. This year, I'm really hitting the Master Homebrew Circuit, or Master Homebrew Programs Circuit of America, which is like 40 competitions. I'm like, tonight, before this podcast started, in order for me to have any luck, I brewed a couple beers, and I have a couple on tap. I'm not by any means a beer brewer. There are a few competitions on the Circuit of America that are only beer, and I'm like, I have no shot, but I'm having to just Hail Mary things in hopes that something will happen, because it is extremely, extremely competitive. The American Mead Maker Association side is also extremely competitive, and it was super fun to watch you guys battling at the top. And I personally got to try. I think I even got to try that Best of Show that won this most recent comp at Mead Stampede. Right? You'd brought it.
Yeah.
A fantastic mead. I mean, you were putting out some great stuff, and it is super interesting to see what you're coming up with next. And I don't know. I've really liked watching you battle for it, and obviously I was on team Kyle like the whole time, and I think you can look back at the Discord. I was hashtagging it. I was trying to get it going, but It's super fun stuff, and I'll be curious to see what you come up with next. Your combinations, your food science background, and obviously, like you mentioned before, the cooking you were doing for the Super Bowl and the sauce boss mentality is bleeding its way into your mead making career right now. So it's just so cool to see that. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about competitive mead making, and I want to center and focus specifically on people like what you mentioned this before. You said the judges are looking for certain things. Like when you first started, you didn't quite understand what you were. I don't want to say how to be successful, but how to get closer to being successful at a competition. Through all of your experience in competitions, what do you think the quote keys to that success are?
So definitely, first and foremost, is you have to put your best product out there. It has to be something that you think tastes good. So that goes into a whole other realm of building your taste. You need to do what you can to expand your palate. Think about palate expanders and do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Do that with friends. Do that with everything you're drinking. Um, Steward competitions, judge competitions, see what other people are making, get inspired from other people. But you really should be tasting all the time. You should be tasting your product. You should taste your must, taste it at one weekend, keep tasting it. See what's evolving, see where, oh, this is like actually good at this level. Maybe I want to try and capture that taste in another way. But basically, if you can't perceive it yourself, if you're just at the stage of, oh, it tastes good, oh, it doesn't taste good, that's not quite where you need to be in order to like make a push in the competitive scene. So it takes some work, and that's it's fun work. It's important and it's fun. But yeah, that's first and foremost. Expand your palate. Once your palate's expanded, and once you start making things that are balanced with keeping in mind acidity, tannin, alcohol, sweetness. Those four things are really important to the overall drinkability of something. If you're making good mead, you have a higher chance of making mini best of show, that's my target at all competitions is make mini best of show, because that means that my mead was good enough to earn a certain score to then move on. Mini best of show itself is a beauty contest. Judges go in, they don't know the scores. They just judge against the other meads on the table. And that's where there's some luck involved, but at the same time, just getting more chances at mini best of show will get you more medals potentially. But the game that I'm speaking of is you want to make things that can stand out, things that either are really well executed, are unique flavors, are maybe unique honey varietals, maybe a lot of fruit, maybe a lot of different spice combinations. It's very much, I've had kind of a mixed bag with that. It's some things that are super experimental, like crush competitions. Like I have a stylized mead that I use the special yeast and hops and malt extract and grape juice, and I like throw all the different elements at it to make this like tropical passion fruit thing come through. And it's done okay at competitions, but it's something where if the judge doesn't get it, they won't let it move forward. So there's a little bit hit or miss there. I will say that if you have usually meads that lean a little on the sweeter side, so not super dry, tend to do better in those kind of competitions. But it's more of the fact that you want to think about how your meat is going to stand up to other things on the table. So another thing to do is do like little tastings with your friends. Bring assortments of meads. See what really hits. See the thing that people are just gravitating towards. And if that's a thing that you have some bottles of, send it to a competition and just make sure that you're entering it correctly, putting it into the correct category, but also using the right descriptors. So you don't want to be exhaustive with your list. You want
Right.
to make it so there's a little bit of room for interpretation for the judges, so they don't like ding you on something, but to list things that you're tasting. And
Yeah.
at that tasting that you do with your friends or whatever to see what will let stand out, ask what they're perceiving.
Hmm.
If it's a um, cinnamon nutmeg vanilla mead and that no one's getting nutmeg, you don't need to list it.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay. Um, that's just kind of part of the game. And the other thing to keep in mind is try to make your meads clear. Use good sanitation practices, good bottling. Make sure your oxidation's down. Keep in mind of all these things because every little step matters in making a competitive mead.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's like also make what you enjoy. And
Yeah.
just make a lot.
I
Make,
want to.
I have so many meads that I have not sent
Uh-huh.
and I really enjoy, but I just keep making more.
So, yeah, on that topic, how do you balance? Because I'm sure you've had this before. You bring something to your friends, they love it, you love it, you send it off to a comp, and it does not do as well as you'd hoped, or the judges hate it for some reason. How do you balance those scales in your mind? Because I'm sure that's happened. That's happened to me at least. I don't know if that's happened to you, but I'm assuming it has at some point.
Oh yeah, for sure. And especially if it's one competition and I don't recognize the judges' names. That's usually when it happens. When I
Hmm.
recognize the judge's name, it means that they are seasoned enough to have judged a number of competitions or have been in the mead world long enough to actually they're practicing their craft.
Hmm.
And that's the thing that you have to keep in mind. It's like not all judges like are doing what we're doing. They're
Right.
not all making so many batches of meat a year. They're not all judging. They're not all doing these things. It might be, oh, I'm a beer judge and I'm going to get this thing in front of me and I'm going to do the best I can, but I'm really not familiar with any of this. So I'm just going to, to us, it kind of looks like they're tearing us a new one. But if you actually read some of the comments, most of the time when I get a beer judge judging my meads, it's just reflected in the score with
Hmm.
how, with if it like doesn't win. Usually the sensory is pretty on point, but then they don't have good justification for why they gave it the score they did.
Hmm.
That's been my experience. But typically, what I do is if it's hitting both in like all my circles, in my social circles, family, friends, homebrew club, all that, I would say, and then I send it off to three competitions, and it like bombs in all three. That usually doesn't happen, but if it does, that's like, oh, maybe like maybe I need to look at the meads that ended up winning. Maybe it's a competition where it was just a beer competition. There's only one category of mead, and like the three meads that won that category were all like really well known meads. They're really good, like mead makers, all the above. So take things with a grain of salt. I always look at my feedback, and the feedback that is most helpful is getting is all the sensory feedback that elicits a trend. So if
Hmm.
there's a trend, then I need to address that in my mead making. If it's just like this one person thinks it's too sweet, this one person thinks it's too dry, like that is a personal preference thing to a certain degree. We're not hydrometers. We don't have the ability to be super picky with our or super analytical with the level of sweetness or acid. And so like there's some things that are just kind of a little bit more subjective than others.
Yeah.
So what I also focus on is like I look at those trends and um, if I see a lot of the kind of I call them like wish-washy comments of they're not really talking about anything. They're just saying it's too sweet, it's too this,
Hmm.
it's too that. Like that's not really focusing on like the overall flavor presentation that I'm
Right.
bringing in the product. They're more focused on um, the little tickers of sweetness, carbonation,
Yeah.
and strength. If people are docking you too many points on that, it kind of means they don't really know what they're talking about because really you shouldn't be docking people too much on those.
Hmm.
It really should be on flavor, on overall presentation of the mead in the greater sense. So,
Yeah.
like, if something really stands out, if you're getting these crazy off flavors like butyric acid, which is baby vomit, that stands out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very apparent. It's that has nothing to do with the presentation and carbonation of the mead
Right.
in those senses. So I try to focus on the sensory
Hmm.
feedback and not those like the ticker feedback, just because I find the ticker feedback not really valuable. I forget who was talking about. I think Chris England was talking about that on Better Judge of Mead, and it's so true. Like a lot of the people that think they know what they're talking about always say the first things they talk about when it's time for the judges to come together is, oh, this wasn't like quite sweet enough to be a semi sweet. It's like a little bit off dry. It's like, okay, well, what are you even saying? It's
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the hardest thing I think for people getting into mead making, competitive mead making, is when you submit stuff, like you said, submitting to the right category. That's a question we see a lot. And then am I submitting this as dry, semi-sweet, or sweet? That can be a can of worms because obviously, like you said, we all have our own palates, and more than likely, you might not have the same thing, a palate understanding of the sweetness as that judge. And then you get knocked because they say, "Well, you called this sweet, and this isn't sweet for me," So there's a little bit of difficulty in that, but you still have to use your judgment, submit things as you think that they are appropriately. And if you get knocked for stuff like that, I think that's where people get offended and hurt. But also, like you said, not every judge is going to knock it out of the park with commentary. We've both submitted tons of meads, and for every solid little sentence of feedback I've received from a judge, I've gotten 5 not so great sentences that are not helpful. So, and that's no shade to judging mead. I know it's hard and it's different. My local brew shop did a kind of small competition, and they had probably 10 to 20 beers and then like 6 or 7 meads. They asked me to come in and judge mead, but everybody was judging mead, and I was judging beer as well. When it got to the beer side, I was so uncomfortable because I don't really know what I'm looking for in beer. So I'm like looking for a crash course with some of these people. And then when it got to the mead side, those beer judges were like, what am I tasting here? What do I need to note? It's so different. And so if you submit to a beer comp or a beer heavy competition, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get quality feedback, but just understand sometimes the palates that are there are seeing different things. And it's just something we deal with. But I do think, kind of going back a step, it is important to send your meads off to competition, even if you don't feel like they're going to win. Because there have been many circumstances where I have done a Hail Mary, just something into a competition, and it's done way better than I thought. And so I think that you never know what judge is going to like it. It's just worth it to try it. I saw this we just posted about Mead Stampede opening in April, and somebody in the Discords was saying, I've only made 2 meads. Should I submit to Mead Stampede? And everybody was like, yes, absolutely. Because obviously having a community around you to taste is great, but the judge pool we bring in for Mead Stampede is well versed, and it's well worth it to send in those meads, even if they don't medal. And that's a hard thing to say in here because everybody wants to get a medal. Nobody submits to a comp and is like, nah, I'm fine. I don't want a medal. Just give me the commentary. Like everybody wants to have some sort of reward. So I think you should definitely submit to comps, but just keep in mind everybody's palate's different, and that's okay. That's just how the world works for us, for the competitive sphere especially. Which last little comment, and then we'll change topics. But I have noticed an interesting trend that when I send off to comps that are more beer heavy, I tend to do a little bit better. When I send off to comps that are mead heavy, I don't do as well. And I have yet to figure out the puzzle pieces of what's going on there. It's hard for me not to take that as a mead maker that I'm not making mead that mead makers like, but I think there's something in the water, maybe in my water. They're not putting it in there. That's a little more friendly to beer. I don't really know. It's a very interesting conundrum I've noticed in my life. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really tough one to say. I don't know. Like when I first started sending stuff out, I definitely just did what was available for competitions. I didn't even like focus on meat only ones, partially because I didn't know about them.
Yeah.
And I was successful with some of those kind of mixed competitions as well. But it's just like if I'm throwing a really strange honey in the mix, I usually like to throw it in a mead competition because there's a higher likelihood that that person has had a strange honey. Um, but at the same time, who knows? Like it's a mixed bag. So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that we all have these different experiences with competitions, but at the end of the day, we're all getting better.
Yeah.
We're all getting better we're making more mead. We're making more well practiced mead. And I think that shows in the bottle shares that we have. And when we're sharing bottles with each other, like outside of the competition realm, I really have been enjoying like for the Iron B, I sent out a bunch of bottles to the people that did well, and hearing their feedback of like when they're sharing it with their homebrew club and stuff, like it was super cool to experience that. And like that's another thing I want to like recommend to people is like once you are in the sphere a little bit, once you start learning some of the names, you can like talk to them. They're really approachable and they love tasting mead and like
Yeah.
it's great to share the love that way, and you'll get different feedback. Sometimes overall, it's probably going to be better because they're not stacking up against other people, but sometimes they're pretty brutally honest and stuff, which is great too. But I think that's another realm where people can get better without just sending to competitions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's that the only issue again is that everybody, I think people sometimes see that as an investment. I'm investing in a comp because I might get a medal out of this,
Yeah.
And there's more to it. Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I just want to send you some stuff. Give me your feedback." You mentioned bottle shares, and I do want to talk about this because you do this a lot with your homebrew club. I think you mentioned it previously. You do like a mead class quite often for your homebrew club. Specifically, this past week, I remember seeing a photo. You had done one that was like mostly piments, which I thought was super cool. How was that received for your club tasting?
Yeah, so I do a class basically for my club that's just like me doing a little bit of discussion and then a lot of listening and answering questions about different meads that I share and bring. I have so many meads in my basement, both from friends, myself, and I like sharing them with other people. That way I can have a little pour and other people can have a bunch of little pours. It's way more fun than just opening a giant bottle of mead and drinking it myself and having a rough day the next day. So what I do is it's staged by categories. So I do like the traditional category, the fruit category, the spiced category, and the specialty. So, and then this year I'm doing the last month. That's going to be the Hojicha Iron B.
Yeah.
And that will be like challenge by choice where some members will come and do that. Some members won't. But basically this past week was the fruit mead. And I just so happened to have 3 piments out of the 9 bottles I had, which was a lot of fun because they were all red piments. They were all um, similar ABV levels. So it's really cool to have people talk about them and share their perceptions, but also just kind of like walk through like, oh, these are all like very similar piments in like on paper,
Yeah.
but when you're drinking them, it's such a difference between them,
Hmm.
and it's so cool to have people come to that realization
Yeah.
that just because it's a piment doesn't mean you're going to get just a Welch's grape juice and wildflower honey.
Right. Yeah.
And so the other informative thing that I do is for the traditional week, I bring a small sample of my honey library
Hmm.
so people can get some different tastes of different honey. A lot of them are familiar with basically just local wildflower and like grocery store clover and orange blossom.
Right. Yep.
So like sharing like some African honey and Hawaiian honey is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I love that too. That's really fun. I don't have as big of a library as I used to. At one point I made like I think for some subscriber amount, I made like a 9 or 10 honey mead because I was like, I've got all this honey. I'm just going to get rid of it. Now I'm like, man, I just got rid of a resource. But it is really fun to share that. And then I love that you're guiding people through what they're tasting too, because I think that's such a necessary thing for people who don't know much about mead. And I feel this especially when I hang out with my friend Tony, who is like the most knowledgeable guy I can ever know in my life about wine. He could sit here and pour a wine and tell me just thousands of facts about it. And I don't have a great palate for wine. I can get some stuff, and he just starts pulling stuff out. And I'm like, holy cow, yeah, you're right. That's here and that's here. So having somebody to guide you through and say, these are the things I note, is super fun. And I love that you get to do that. I do think it's interesting that, well, you noted that people don't understand honey. I think it's interesting that we don't have access to all these different kinds of honey around. Obviously, I think the world wants you to just have wildflower honey because it's the rumor or whatever, or maybe the truth, that it helps with your allergies and yada yada. But like, aside from Manuka and Orange Blossom, those are the only ones I ever see in stores that are like different. It's Wildflower, Manuka, and Orange Blossom. So unless that's just an Oklahoma thing, I don't really know.
Oh, it's a thing here too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating, but that's super fun, and I love that you get to do that. And I highly encourage anybody who has the skills like Kyle does to do that. It does take time and effort and money. I mean, obviously, you're investing all of those things into people as they're doing this, but I have no doubt that your club is growing greatly because of that. And you've kind of kicked me in the gear to try and do something like that with my homebrew club because it'd be fun. They do a tech talk like once a month.
Yep.
And I probably need to step up and do a tech talk at some point. It'd be fun to talk about it. But all right, I want to bring us into another topic, which I have limited experience with this, and I want to pick your brain at it some. Let's talk about historical meads. Obviously, this is a can of worms because historical. There are historical mead references like the Tej. You know, that is its own, has basis in historical fashion. The Polish mead style is where we sometimes get into a bit of a tizzy because I understand there is historical value to it, but I feel like the Polish meads sometimes get a weird rap because it's a lot of ratio based meads rather than a process where you're, walking 200 steps and then stirring your honey and all the other stuff I've seen. So what's your experience with Polish meads?
Well, I kind of want to talk about the historical, just overarching theme first,
Go for
where,
it.
yeah, so basically, to become someone who's in the running for Mead Maker of the Year, you have to make all the categories of mead. So historical is definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some medals from it for sure. But the other aspect of historical that is interesting is the fact that it just references like, oh, typically Tej or typically a Polish mead. And it's like, Well, what are we supposed to get out of those things?
Right.
Because for Tej, it's this is a whole another can of worms. But I'm gonna like briefly talk about it. Um, there's the like traditional like what is kind of per family, what they do differently in actual Ethiopia,
Hmm.
where it's typically a honey fermented beverage that has gesho, either the sticks or the leaves, some combination, various amounts, usually wild fermented, usually consumed young, so it's cloudy with yeast. If you send that off to a competition, it's going to be a bottle bomb and you're going to hurt people. And like, don't do that, obviously.
Yeah.
So, like, all the things that we do for Tej are based on just using like the process of bittering a honey fermented liquid
Yeah.
with a plant.
Right.
Then usually it's gesho, but this past week I was listening to a commercial Tej maker that they can't use gesho for because it's
Really?
yeah, because it's not part of grass, so
Huh.
generally recognized as safe. So they have to use hops. So a lot of the Tej in the US that's like legal to
Yeah.
produce is a hop freaking mead. And it's like,
That's
okay,
not
that's a
historical.
spice. Yeah, exactly. But like the topic of using a plant to bitter your must, like that is essentially the root of gesho and
Hmm.
what it's used for in Ethiopia. So it has like it has that connection, but it's just like what the heck?
That's odd. Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, I heard that this week and I was like, what is going on? But anyway, for there are the recipes that you're talking about where they say, yeah, like you have to hold this stirring rod until your hand starts hurting, and then you can drop that into the must or whatever.
Right.
Like there's a lot of that and paces and
Yeah.
like drop an egg kind of thing, and that those things are really cool in terms of like just seeing what was and seeing maybe how that thing could have tasted, but at the same time, those ingredients back then are way different than they are now
Right.
in this kind of world. But I actually submitted to a competition that's called Deja Brew, which has
I've heard about that
historical
one. Hmm.
mead, where they judge it based on those recipes that were given.
Hmm.
So you basically make a mead from those recipes, and it's judged as that, and the
That's cool.
judges have that information, so they're not just going in blind,
Yeah.
which is cool.
That's cool.
But yeah, with the big elephant in the room, strength and everything included, Polish meads.
Hmm.
I think there are very few people that are remotely making them as real Polish meads.
Yeah.
Um, because there needs to be some serious oxidation
Hmm.
involved, usually barrel aging. The type of honey matters a lot with that, with usually using a Polish like linden style honey, a Polish buckwheat style honey,
Hmm.
combinations of them. And the amount of fruit it's actually on the lower side. They're not super fruit forward meads.
Hmm.
Most of the fruit character you're probably going to get from the honey and the sherry notes from the oxidative process.
Hmm.
Um, so like that's really important. So a lot of the meads that are out there that are the judge in the Polish category, those are just big sack berry meads. So actually, the mead you're drinking right now,
Yeah.
that black currant buckwheat, that is a 1-to-1
Hmm.
mead. That's a Dwoniak, which
Hmm.
is one part water, one part honey. Um, but it's way too young. There's none of that crazy oxidative
Yeah.
character. So I never submitted it as a Polish mead. It won a Mazer Cup in the sweet berry category, but it's like it's not a Polish mead yet.
Yeah.
It needs to have that oxidative character. But when you're looking at the BJCP guidelines right now, it just says, yeah, typically a Polish mead, not a, it doesn't say like it needs to express this oxidative kind of thing. It needs to have this honey character. So the historical mead that I made
Hmm.
that has won a couple medals, it's a mead that has some barrel age time to it. Like it's been in a barrel for 3.5 years.
Holy cow.
Uh,
Yeah.
but the fruit character is like kind of weird on it. It has aronia and tart cherry. Aronia is not a berry that they would use for this,
Right.
so that's already out of the question.
Right.
And then the honey I use is Hawaiian. It's ule blossom. So it's like, that's not Polish at all.
What?
Yeah. So like, yeah, it has some of the characteristics of, oh, it's the ratio's right and it has oxidative notes and there's
Yeah.
like some pleasant fruity component. But like it's not really a Polish mead.
Right. Well, I mean, it is very awkward too because I have one, I call it Polish mead for the reason that it is the ratio of honey to water to all the things. But that's pretty much it. Like you said, it's a sack strength, essentially fruited mead, and it's done well enough in competitions in the historical category. And I felt for a while I've been like, am I am I a fraud for putting it through here? But I think the truth is, like you said, nobody else is doing it. Like the things that are winning are not necessarily, I don't want to say that as a blanket statement. Most of the things I believe that are winning are not doing everything you're saying.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
where
there's basically like there are like 2 or 3 mead makers in the US right now that are doing it like the right way.
Yeah.
And like when those guys compete, they are getting a medal. Like
Yeah.
it's bar none. Like I won't like mention the names, but basically they're usually Polish characters involved. It's usually hard to say their names.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
these guys, they've been making Polish meads for a very long time, and some of them have like they mention it later where it's like, oh yeah, this mead was aged 10 years. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's not something that a lot of us are doing. A lot of us are using like kind of the cheaper honey because it's a very honey intense mead. Like
Yeah.
for me, I use the ule blossom because like it's tasty and like it's not super expensive and it's readily available for me. So it's like, okay, I just used it, but it's so funny. And I've heard rumors that they're gonna be updating the guidelines, but at the same time, I think that and like Mazer Cup's gonna be requesting more information from people that enter.
Mm-hmm.
And they have rightfully added like barrel aged meads and wood aged meads to the categories because that's what mine should be. Mine should be barrel aged mead.
Yeah.
And like that's important to like if you have that barrel aged slightly oxidative mead, that doesn't necessarily just make it go into Polish. It should have a different category.
Yeah.
If anything, I don't know. I think that some of the guidelines are definitely a little funky right now. But at the same time, it's what we have to play by. So
yeah,
that's kind of what we do.
Yeah. It's an interesting issue that has been talked about for a little bit now. There's many people in the Discord who have started the discourse on it too. And I'll be curious to see what changes. Obviously, I think, oh my gosh, this is terrible. I should remember. The Mead, it's Ken Schramm and all them's initiative that they started.
Oh, the Mead Institute.
I forgot the name. They obviously are trying to put a train car to what's happening and lead a direction. So it'd be interesting to see if they try to do anything on it. But I also know that the moment you say you can't submit this to a competition because it doesn't meet our guidelines is when people are like, what do you mean? You know, so it'll be interesting to see. I would love to, on that topic, I would love to do a true historical, you follow the steps, you know, you crack the egg, like you said, you do all the things to make the mead, and then you can submit it with that storyline. I think that's really fun. It's just committing the time. It's also, I mean, it's so hard to do. The people doing the true Polish meads, they must have mansions because I can't fathom putting something in a barrel right now, at least where I'm at in life. And granted, I have a room for mead making, so I feel like I'm extremely blessed. But I'd have a hard time putting something in a barrel for a couple of years. So there must be some secret, or they're just willing to lose the space for a hot minute. All right, Kyle, you've allowed me to segue perfectly into my next topic. Thank you for that.
Oh
Would
yeah.
you ever use this honey in your mead making career? Do you know what this honey is?
Oh yeah. That's the Walmart special
Uh huh. Would you ever use it?
for sure. Absolutely.
When would you use it?
I would use it on almost anything but a traditional, and I would especially use it if I'm testing out a concept, and I don't really want to waste expensive honey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do that all the time, actually, where I on these like little 1 gallon experimental batches, like I did a pickle mead today. I just go to the grocery store and just buy a a cheaper honey. Sometimes it's that honey, that pure and simple. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's not, but it's usually something that I can quickly. I don't need to like. It's easy to weigh out. It's not in a bucket. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have a load of honey, but at the same time, for small batches and whatnot, it's kind of nice just getting a smaller container um and for proof of concept stuff, it's nice to do use cheaper honey.
Yeah, I agree. I think using it for um, strongly fruited things too can be
Oh yeah,
helpful because you're hiding, like the moment you make a mead, and obviously we want to highlight honey all the time, but let's be realistic. If you're making a blueberry bomb mead and you want blueberry to be highlighted, there's no point in spending $10 a pound for honey that's going to be flavor blasted by the bombs of the blueberry. But so this honey, spoilers for anybody who makes my apple cinnamon. This is what I use to make my apple cinnamon, and I use it for the base, and then quite often I use it for the back sweetening. Um, it's a decent honey. Obviously, I think there's some logistics of how true of a honey is it. If you took it to a lab, is it 100%? I don't know, but it allows me, because I'm spending a little bit less money on that honey, I can still produce more product. Obviously, somebody just clicked off the podcast and said, I'm done with this podcast now because I said that. But if it comes down for me to, can I make more mead, or can I make, if I'm going to make 5 gallons or 1 gallon, I'm going to go make 5 gallons and save my money, or use that same amount of money, because I want to be able to make more and share more. So that's, again, not to shade any expensive honey purchasing, but I think that sometimes we crap down on the cheap honeys, but they are useful, like you said, for all those projects.
yeah, and even like you can make it's kind of like making a good beer with extracts and specialty grains.
Mm.
Like it's definitely doable. You're using a lot of that cheaper honey for fermentables and for so like you can use it later on for you can use a different honey later on if you really want to back sweeten, change the character overall if you're not getting exactly what you like out of it.
Yeah.
Providing a fermentable sugar when it is a honey, like okay, it is true source certified. Like it's not like it's a KFC honey packet. Like some of those things, it definitely says like on there, like oh, there's
Is it
some
honey sauce? What's the verbiage
yeah,
there?
it's honey sauce, yeah. But um, yeah, it's definitely. I would rather see people make mead than than not. So
Yeah.
I have I bring no shame to that game for sure.
Well, so I have like a little 2-pound bottle of meadow foam. I've held on to it for a hot minute. I've made a meadow foam mead before, and I've done it, ferment the meadow foam and then back sweeten. And I just back sweetened an orange blossom that I fermented through with this meadow foam, and it tastes great. And realistically, I saved myself a lot of money because I didn't go full meadow foam. Obviously, there's going to be a flavor difference. There's, A/B testing we could do all day. But the truth is, it's going to be different. We're not all made of cash, though. And I'm sure somebody in the bean making world is just rolling in money right now. But most people aren't. And so you have to choose your battles, where you're going to use your money. And the honey can be stretched further in back sweetening, like you said. So you said you have a honey library. What is the most interesting honey you've found in your time collecting, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, my honey library is relatively small. I really wish I like saved a bunch of little jars and like toward the end of a bucket of honey or
Mm.
a thing of honey, especially some of my experiments with Flying Bee Ranch, I would get like a 3 pound container of honey and make a 1 gallon traditional out of it.
Yep.
And that's something I did for experimental reasons to build up my traditional experience. And it was a lot of fun. And I recommend that to anyone.
Hmm.
But at the end, I never had any more honey.
Mm.
But basically, from my collection right now, I probably have like 20 to 25 little sample
Oh,
things.
cool.
Um, I will talk about this honey until I'm like blue in the face. But like dark Miambo honey
Mm.
is one of my favorites. Has a lot of similarities to um, if you take some aspects of buckwheat, some aspects of avocado, add a touch of smoke,
Hmm.
um, a little. There's like some prune and dark plum, dark cherry character to it.
Hmm.
Enrobed in chocolate, kind of dark toffee, and
Interesting.
molasses and smoke. That's really what it brings. And I actually like that. That's something I have been using in my pie mints a lot lately.
Mm.
Is that honey? But that's the most interesting thing when people are like at the honey tasting when they're tasting all the different honeys. They're like, "Whoa, this one's crazy."
Yeah. So that's one of your favorites you have now. Is there one you don't have that's like your favorite you've ever tried?
Uh, it's a
I know
great
I'm just
question.
putting you on in the moment.
Well, I I don't have sweet clover on me right now, and I
Mm.
love that honey. Like as soon as I opened up a bucket of it, I'm just like transported into the ultimate essence of like Teddy Grahams and childhood memories of like putting it on like toasted bread. And I'm like, oh, it's insane. It's
Yeah.
so good. Like sweet clover just transports me basically.
It's
So
incredible.
that's something I wish I just had all the time. Um, I love raspberry blossom. Like I'm a huge fan of those berry flavored honeys. Like
Uh-huh.
it's insane how it just captures a lot of the essence of being in those the the berry farms essentially.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of berry picking, and when I have these honeys, I'm like, oh, I'm transported not to when I'm eating a berry, but when I'm in that when I'm picking them.
Hmm. Yeah, I
So
have
that's so
a mixed berry from Honey Blossom. It's a resource that been put onto recently, and it's super good. Very interesting berry flavored. I've used raspberry before. I've used blueberry. I've used blackberry. All of them are fascinating. I definitely encourage if you're listening to this now and you're saying I don't understand the differences between honey. It's very valid. Check out Flying Bee Ranch. They have a ton of interesting varietals, very easy to access. And one resource that I'm developing or trying to develop in partnership with a lot of people on the Discord is a honey. I'm going to call it a resource, but it's essentially every honey I can find with the descriptors of what the honeys taste like, along with links where you can purchase it if it's online. And then eventually, we're going to try and put on the other side of it for each one what it tastes like post fermentation generally. Obviously, yeast and that will change. But knowing that, you ferment blackberry honey and then it puts out this character post fermentation can be helpful. That's a longer term sort of thing, though. That's going to take some time and obviously effort to create all of those. But that's a resource I'll put down in the description because I've started it at least, so it's going. But honey is super fun. If you can save some, like Kyle said, like when you buy a bucket or however much, save a small jar, use it for tasting experiences in the future. That's the best way to keep your palate updated. I
yeah.
think
I
it's
also
super.
have another another plug here for the World Honey Exchange.
Yeah.
You can get a little sample pack, and they come in like little jars like this big.
Ooh.
And these honeys are so wild because really they're not. It's kind of like a new wave of different South American and African honey that they're definitely out there, but they're not out there in the quantity that, like, let's say orange blossom is, or like some of the Hawaiian honeys. It's not as widely known, so
Yeah.
it's really cool to actually be able to taste some of these. I recommend doing that before buying a bucket as well. The prices are quite good for World Honey Exchange, so you'll be tempted to buy a bucket. But if you get that dark Miambo and you're like, oh heck no, like I don't want that,
Yeah.
it's very intense honey, and like there's no real like bad honey in terms of unless it's like been adulterated or like burnt to a crisp where it's like tastes acrid. There's really like if it's coming from a bee, it's usually like pretty dang good and you can make a good meat out of it. But some honeys are a lot harder to do that with. So
Yeah.
I recommend getting the honey taster sampler from World Honey Exchange for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, and I'll try, if I remember to, I'll try and put these links down below. I'll probably forget. So hopefully people listening will remember to look that up. Don't do it when you're driving. Obviously, if you're driving, wait till you get to your location to do that. But all right, well, we got to wrap this up a little bit. Kyle, thank you. First of all, thank you for enduring the gauntlet that was 2024 and the Ultimate Mead Maker Challenge. That was super fun. It has been incredible to watch you go through 2024 and continue to fight for the Mead Maker of the Year title. And I know that you're not competing as much this year, which is unfortunate because I think you would be a shoo-in, in my opinion, if you were going for it this year. But it's been really fun to watch you be competitive, and I'm super excited again to see what you're going to create, homebrew and otherwise in the future. And it's been fun. So thank you for committing yourself to making mead and the mead community a better place. You are the type of person that I can point to directly and say, this guy cares about mead, and he's obviously investing time and money and just himself into this hobby. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely appreciate what you are doing as well. And it's definitely one of those things where I look at you and I'm like, oh, what can I do? I don't have the video side down. I don't really like care to get into that, but at the same time, I want to give that level of effort that I've seen from you for so many years. So it's definitely something where I appreciate being on this podcast and sharing my story and getting it so that people can hear it. That's another thing where it's like there are a lot of great mead personalities out there. Just a lot of us aren't super vocal and vibrant. So it's nice to be able to share some of this stuff with others so that they can learn from our mistakes and our passions and our resources instead of going through the trials and tribulations themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really very good point too. I think people sometimes see a platform as a sign of success, meaning that, theoretically I make a good mead, but in truth, you and many other people are way more talented mead makers than myself. I just so happen to have a camera and audio equipment and, put myself out there on the internet. And so I hope that people listen to these podcasts and understand that this stuff you're hearing is super valuable and you should go and apply it and listen to everything Kyle says and go do it. I whatever he says is the word. Go for it now, because I promise you'll be successful if you will just follow his advice. So Kyle, thank you for again investing in our community. And this is not the last time you'll be on the podcast. I have a feeling that we'll be opening up more cans of worms in the future. Maybe we'll do a further deep dive entire episode dedicated to historical meads, and we'll do some sort of fun with that or something like that. But thank you for being on the podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, cheers.